staying on for the final part, the public part of our evening today. And it's going to be another hopefully extraordinary evening with Mukul Sharma, Professor Mukul Sharma, who Premjish will introduce. But just speaking for some times now on my interest in the idea of social justice and the ideas of nature, and the synergies between different histories of oppression and how they manifest in the way we have classified and talked about nature. I'm not reading this out. Actually, I've prepared nothing. I'm just speaking, just a short preface to the talk. And I've been really interested in, and actually that's the basis of shared ecologies also. The idea of shared ecologies comes from producing the idea of nature from the ground up and not as a given. Because when we classify something, as Jibesh mentioned about terminology, that we also extract it, we also reduce it, and we also sort of lose the many other meanings and possibilities of those extractions. In these histories of extractions, we are surrounded by them, by even classifications of plants and the various systems of classifications we occupy and we live with, and the deep histories and the histories of those, how they came about. And some of the histories which are not talked about, which are not visible, is about the histories of the oppressed. And there's been a very strong environmental justice movement in the Americas for a very long time, and they come from certain issues of siting of waste sites and etc., but also extend to the Black Panther movement, and they synergize in the justice movements of the people there. And less talked about is the history of oppression and its relationship to ideas of nature, which now people are talking, artists I know are talking about it also. There was some talk here today also. But this has to be explored much deeper because it really goes to the heart of the ecological question, that what is nature, what is ecology, what are we mobilizing, and how do we shift our understanding of that, how do we become productive elements in not something which is given to us, but we all produce. So that's the premise of today's evening, and Professor Mukul Sharma is an extraordinary scholar. He's written extensively on this area. He's probably the best person to speak about it. But I'm going to hand the evening over to Premjish Achari, whom I'm very grateful that he's come. He has engaged with this idea of this evening today for some time. I'll just, for those of you who don't know him, I'll introduce him briefly. I think it's much more than what I'm going to, the few lines I'm going to read about, because that's what is provided to me. So Premjish Achari teaches art history and theory at Ashoka University in Greater Noida, a Delhi-based writer and curator. He is the initiator of Future Collaborations, a curatorial platform supporting the development of theoretically and politically informed curation as an essential aspect of contemporary art practice. And I'm going to hand it over to Premjish to introduce Mukul and to conduct the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here after those long sessions and those intense discussions and reflections. Before I welcome Mukul, thank you all, individual speakers, for your wonderful presentations. They were quite inspiring. Before I introduce Mukul, so Mukul told me that I should just say he's Mukul and he's Ravi's friend. Now I'm going to do more than that. I've been hearing about you from Ravi since almost 1 year now because of our online meetings, discussions that Ravi and I have sometimes. And Ravi has been asking me to read your publications, your books, and that is how I came to know about you. And it's been a great pleasure that you are here, and I'm sure your presentation and what you're going to talk today is surely going to fertilize the already discussed the tapestry of discussions that has been laid before us right now. And as Ravi said, this is again a field that has not been engaged with, and it's not like it's not been engaged with, but it's deliberately not engaged with because of the caste position. And Mukul's talk will very strongly foreground the caste as an operative term in the ecological politics today. Mukul Sharma is a professor of environmental studies at Ashoka University, and before this, he was the professor and head, Department of Development Communication, and Dean, Academics at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, New Delhi. And his formal academic qualification is in political science. Since 1984, he has worked in academic development and media sectors. I welcome you, Mukul, to give you a keynote. Thank you.
Good evening. Salam, Namaskar, Jai Bhim. Thanks, Premjish, and hope you will keep me. And thank you, Ravi Agrawal, Sukanya, and the foundation, and the Shared Ecologies program for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to address all of you. So, as you see, Dalit Ecologies is the title of my address today. And I've been asked by Premjish and Sukanya to speak for, to give me the bread, speak for 50, 60 minutes at least. So I will try to be within the time limit, 45, 50 minutes. So bear with me after the long, because I arrived here around 4:30, and since then I was listening to the various panels, very enriching and very thoughtful. So must be a very busy day for you. So at the end of this day. So with all the claimers and disclaimers, so let me begin by asking this question that what is Dalit Ecologies? So in 2020-21, I did a 3-part webinar series, which was titled Dalit Ecologies series. And it was organized by a very little-known college, Sheshadripuram Evening College, Bangalore, under the banner of anti-caste politics and environmental justice. There I try to unpack this term Dalit Ecologies through caste, through historical lens, and through the anthology of Dalit folklore. So 3-part. Then it so happened that Dalit Ecologies, Caste and Environment Justice became the title of my new book, forthcoming book, which will be out early next year. So in my address today, am I audible? Is fine. So in my address today, I will draw upon from some of these previous works. Some of them are available on YouTube and social media platforms, and some are very new, which I'm presenting thanks to Ravi, and Premjish will be presenting for the first time, and happy to, and will be part of the book, so we'll be happy to get your comments if time permits. So, we have rich academic and political work in other parts of the world around black ecologies, racial ecologies, feminist ecologies, and they try to analyze the interrelationship between race, gender, and environmentalism through an interdisciplinary lens of race and gender studies and social and political ecology. We have historical work, Dalit autobiographies, life narratives of racialized communities or casteized communities in expressing their ecological relations. If you follow the parliament debate, just a few days back, 3 days back, a parliamentarian read out the poem of Om Prakash Valmiki, Thakur Ka Kuan, and it created such a huge hue and cry in the past 2 days, media, if you're following that political note. And that this Thakur Ka Kuan actually is a poem by Om Prakash Valmiki expressing the ecological relations. In recent past, we got a new collective thinking and initiative called Global Black Ecologies, which focus on the, I quote, critical insights, world-making and world-sustaining practices of global black communities, unquote. This is primarily Afro-diasporic in nature. In 2022, just last year, a prominent journal, Environment and Society Advances in Research, brought out a special issue on global black ecologies to make visible the work of black communities in creating alternatives in environmentalism. I have got this copy, and I will be happy to share this with Premjish and Ravi later. So this issue was, and this issue is free online, so you can also download. So this issue was part of a collaborative effort which included the Black Ecology series, the Black Ecologies initiative, Making Livable World, and a magazine publication. So my understanding or my conception of Dalit ecologies is also influenced by and derives from these works, which I just now mentioned. However, the fact of the matter is, as Ravi was explaining briefly, that in Indian stream of social political ecology and in caste and Dalit studies, I underline, there is not much focus of caste and Dalit elements in the context of environment and nature. I haven't heard much about Dalit ecologies in the existing Indian environmental literature. So again, coming back to from where I started, what, where, how, when of Dalit ecologies. So first and foremost, in my understanding, I would say Dalit ecologies make a case for the inclusion of caste as a critical lens to conceptualize environmental issues. Issues of justice, injustice, issues of access, rights, alienation and attachment, expression, protest. And caste and nature, I was here since 5 o'clock, and a couple of presentations also brought out these points, that caste and nature are intimately interwoven in India. Dalit experiences and narratives constantly underline their everyday ecological burdens in a marked hierarchical order. Images of land animate caste anxieties around labor, blood, and bondage. In dry regions, Dalits must often sacrifice their lives to recharge ponds and water resources. From village to city and temple to school, caste metaphors of pollution, impurity, and dirt dominate places and spaces through imaginaries of danger posed by the presence of Dalits. Forest can be a heaven or a hell for Dalits. A river is some place to dispose the dead body. So, in this context, nature, entwined with fear and violence, horror and hardship, bloodbath and war, makes environmental experiences of Dalit distinctive and different. The interrelationship between caste and nature affirms and reaffirms particular kind of cultural representation, legitimizes and delegitimizes spaces, places, and people, creates and reproduces social hierarchies, ignites conflicts and violence, and offers at the same time creative arenas for challenging domination. There is a specificity of caste's nature, casteized nature, different from the universal question of accessing nature. Village, occupation, agriculture, food, water, land, irrigation, I can name many, have been important sites for imposition of hierarchies of caste, and caste economy thrives on the use and abuse of natural resources. So if we want to place caste as a critical lens, we need to ask, how are caste hierarchies reproduced by uses of nature? What is the role of purity and pollution? What are the structuring principles of access and exclusion? It is a question of touchability or hierarchy in general, or are other principles of caste hierarchies besides touchability also in operation here? What is the caste of water? How do caste relations structure irrigation networks in India or in a village? Why should Dalits or lower caste people feel and work for conservation and promotion of traditional water bodies and water harvesting system when, leave aside the issue of their ownership, they are not even allowed to take water from these ponds, tanks, and wells? Come to Rajasthan, come to Bihar and UP. Why and how do caste and its culture determine pure and impure food, what we eat and what we prefer to eat? How is it use of animals declared legitimate or illegitimate through caste? Why should Dalit fight for restoration of traditional community-based occupation, Vishwakarma, Karmkar, you must have heard in the recent time, when it is precisely these that support their ghettoization and do not empower them to improve their situation in civil society and the market? What does a specific environmental and occupational setup play a role in the making and unmaking of the collective entry or exit of a caste in environmental politics? Think of sanitation, waste collection, leather. How do certain other environmental arenas, for example, the tank irrigation technologies and practices in South India, explicate caste and Dalit intersections at the site of environment? How do physical and social environment characterized by ghetto, you must have heard if you're from North, Chamartola, if you are from South, Cheri and Halgari, if you are from West, Baraj, and untouchability, act as a material context for Dalit environment subject formation? So many of these questions. So that is the first point I would like to place regarding Dalit ecologies. The second point, in simple and straight ways, Dalit ecologies is about Dalit perspective on environment. And Dalit perspective, meaning their experience, their demands, their dreams, their voices. And we know Dalit is a political category, a very heterogeneous term in which we have touchables, ex-untouchables, lower caste, subordinate caste, uh, other backward class. So they offer a range of perspective on how and in what ways Dalit ecologies can be understood or can be constituted. For example, Mushars, an untouchable caste in the Indo-Gangetic plain of India and Nepal, create their ecological world through folklores, folk stories, songs, woven around two warrior brothers, Dina and Bhadri. Mushars situate them as their ecological ancestors in contemporary struggles over land, ponds, rivers, particularly among the agricultural seasons in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh states. Nekchan, which will be part of my case study today when I will be also using the PPT. Sorry, Premjish, I'm not good with the PPT, so that's why. So, Nekchan, a low caste Mali, a caste that has been described as embodying nurturers and gardeners of the earth, builds a rock garden to celebrate people's life as well as document his story of Anthropocene through wasted, discarded, and broken materials, focusing on a history of violence in the making of the modern Chandigarh city in Punjab state. Paul Diwakar, one of my friends, a key organizer of national campaign on Dalit human rights, says that the daily existence of Dalits, their labor, place, occupation, discrimination, violence, and the intensity of living in hard and hostile situations, they are the actually real issues of Dalit climate activism. So each of these subjugated castes can have their own vantage point to underline the ecological consequences of the caste system and its enduring old and new lives in Indian society. There could be multiple Dalit ecologies, which could result in a collage, creating a new whole. Diverse perspective cross through a common juncture, and that is the domination of Hindu Brahminical caste society, attitude and practices, Sarmas and Singhs, and their control and influence over the natural physical world. The Hindu Brahminical world embodies binaries of Dalits and others, untouchables and Savarnas. The marginalization and stigmatization of Dalits based on caste, property, production relations are highly evident in contemporary India. Equally importantly, the dominance of caste in natural and human resources, as well as in industrial and cultural power, plays significant role in shaping environmental politics. At the same time, Dalit ecologies commonly signify a recurrent migration of communities between two different worlds. One certainly of everyday ecological experience in a marked hierarchical order, and other of their own indigenous imagination, particularly in relation to earth, life, landscape, place, space, animal, waste, livelihood, work, and in these areas. So Dalit thinkers and the contemporary search of Dalit memory initiated by Dalit authors and others create, as I said, varied and alternative spatial and social metaphors around environment. We can trace Dalits' quest for their place in nature by taking in different voices, songs and narratives of early bonded laborers, writings by leading Dalit ideologues, thinkers, leaders, writers, myths, memories, and metaphors of Dalit around nature, their movement, their labor, their footsteps, which together can highlight Dalits' attempts at defining themselves in casteized nature. And my third point, and then I will come to my case studies, why should we focus on Dalit ecologies today? Why today? Because at least 2-3 reasons, and there could be many. It appears at the intersection of 3 critical dimensions of our century. One is an increased academic and political interrogation of manifold dimensions of caste power, by which caste appropriation and domination is produced and developed in many spheres, or I would say every spheres of society. Second is the globalization of theory and practice of the environmental justice movement, which Ravi was mentioning in the beginning, which goes beyond a focus on toxic exposure to African American communities and makes it politically potent internationally, impacting the mainstream environmental agenda. And the third is a significant rise of Dalit and backward caste political and cultural power, which is simultaneously, I would underline, simultaneously marked by many differences, complexities of reason, local histories, interest, classes, political power. However, these movements or these groups or their issues are as much for articulating their position on space, environment, natural and physical resources as they are for achieving political power, political representation, identity, development, and other areas that we see in our mainstream media and otherwise. So, as I said, one can capture several key actions, writings and movements of Dalit intellectuals, individuals, organizations who grapple with the issue of Anthropocene, industry, technology, West, urban development, science, demonstrating a range of issues appearing under the broad scope of Dalit ecologies. They also show that how long and how far Dalit politics have traveled in the past few decades, in thinking and activism both, as they increasingly try to address some of the key issues of environmental injustices and pose challenge to mainstream environmental politics. So I will focus today on 2 case studies, one from rural and one from urban. But before, am I on the time? Yeah. So, but before getting into the case study, I also must mention quickly here some of the challenges that we face in conceptualizing or understanding Dalit ecologies. This is also located at the cusp of deep tensions built around the interrelationship between anti-caste movement and environmental movement, between Dalitism and environmentalism. There are several challenges in dealing with these 2 streams together under Dalit ecologies. The main aim of ecology to understand the environment of humans and non-humans, living and non-livings, biotic, abiotic, and their interaction with each other. Yet, Dalit and anti-caste movements in diverse ecologies have been historically confronted with social hierarchy and authority of power, and have fought for dignity, justice, equality. Centuries of caste and birth-based subjugation, denial of human existence, and a search for their place on earth have made Dalit visions anthropocentric. Concept of biosphere and biodiversity of organism and one or common future have been questioned by Dalit pushing them to address caste social injustices now and here, not in remote future. And it is argued that in the name of greater good, Dalits present and future should not be asked to bear the burden of future and capitalist exploitation of the environment. So I take such tension points in Dalit political articulation as a critical source to reflect on their different attitude to and practices of imagining environmental relation amidst various kind of social and economic structure. So now coming to my first case study, have you heard of Dasrat Manjhi, who carved a road through the mountain in Gaya district of Bihar, from which I come from, for 22 years, day and night? It is said in the memory of his wife, who died after a serious injury inflicted inside the mountain. A man who died in 2007 at the age of 78 had independently and single-handedly brought down a 360 feet long, 25 feet high hill and created a 16 feet wide pass in place of an almost impenetrable common natural hilly space. So Manjhi has been vividly described as the mountain man, the superman, the hill man of Bihar, the poor man's Shah Jahan, the modern day Bhagirath, a record holder in 1999 Limca books. Well-known Bollywood filmmaker Ketan Mehta made a feature film on Dasrat Manjhi named Manjhi the Mountain Man that was released in 2015. Film actor Amir Khan visited the village and family of Dasrat Manjhi in 2014 for his TV show Satyamev Jayate 2, where Ravi also appeared. You appeared in Satyamev Jayate 1 or 2? 2. So, 4, okay. So, yeah, 4. So anyway, so he was this Dasrat Manjhi, he was symbolically made the Chief Minister of Bihar for a day by the then and present Chief Minister of the state, Nitish Kumar. Upon his death, he was given the state funeral by Bihar government. So many descriptions are there about Manjhi, that could be true. However, one can also see Dasrat Manjhi from an environmental lens, and how a poor, a Dalit, a landless, a kamya, means bonded labor, perceive and act upon on commons, the common property resources, and how it could be different and distinct from others. Manjhi equated life with nature. I quote, he said, "Life is nature, a moving, breathing thing. It transforms from one form to another. Transformation means going beyond our form," unquote. Through this case study, I established the importance of seeing Dasrat Manjhi as an environmentalist with a difference, even when he was never a part of the mainstream environmentalism. So you know commons, we all know about commons, which are often natural resources, land, forest, mountains, water bodies, ponds, groves, air, earth. They have been a touchstone for different kinds of environmentalism in varied context. We know it as common property resources. They are referred as public, collective, and common. They are also referred, which is visible, resourceful, and useful. Common space is that which is open, inclusive, and accessible to all. We know there are rich studies on common resources. This Nobel laureate, Elinor Ostrom work, pioneering work governing the commons, where she develops a broad theory, so I will not get into those details. Robert Wade work. So in Indian environmental discourse, commons have also been a cherished topic to explain their importance for ecological sustainability. So coming to state Bihar, district Gaya, block Atari, village Gahlor, Dasrath Manjhi was born, lived and died in his place. Look, Gahlor had been an isolated village because of the high hill range spreading from Bodh Gaya to Rajgir and blocking it up front. The laborers had to trek through difficult terrains for hours to reach their working fields and nearby market. Children had to walk 8 kilometers to reach their school and the nearest block towns. Basic medical services were 70, 80 kilometers away. After Manjhi's accomplishment, the distance between Kehlor and Wazirganj has reduced to only 13 kilometers, and a road within the heart of the mountains easily connects the village with the field, school, hospital, and other everyday destinations. There are rich and varied accounts as to why and how Manjhi decided to cut through the mountain and carve a road. Manjhi was a Kamiya, a bonded laborer in the village. Kamiya had to work hard throughout the year, tending to the landlord's land, household animals, fuel woods, and whatever else the owners asked them to do. One day at noontime, Manjhi's wife, Faguni Devi, was bringing food and water to his workplace. It was hot, dry day, and Faguni, walking through the mountain slopes, got seriously injured. When he came to know of his wife's injury, he could not take her to the hospital because of this mountain. Faguni endured great pain and died after a few weeks without getting any timely and adequate treatment. After some time, Manjhi sold his goats to buy a borer and hammer, his sole instrument for breaking the mountain. He began breaking the mountain and undertook it with painstaking regularity, which lasted by several accounts for 22 years. He was a bonded laborer, so he had to fulfill his duties to the landlord, and then every day he headed towards the mountain for a few hours and with his instruments. His labor was ridiculed, and he was called mad, insane, crazy, but but this could never take away his willpower. Manjhi was asked by the forest department to stop making holes in the mountain as the government claimed property rights over the common property resources. So why Manjhi? Why I bring his case study? The hills and bushes were all inhabited by leopards, bears, wild dogs, wolves, and snakes. As Kamiya and laborers, Manjhi and others had to constantly deal with the dangers, attacks, injuries, and loss due to these animals. Constant struggle with animals for their survival. At times, he had very ambivalent attitude towards land, forest, and mountain. His feelings were at times negative, as he performed such labor on land, forest, and mountain, which was humiliating, backbreaking, and life-risking. He inhabited, Manji inhabited a natural world of dry land, hard mountain, fearful forest, and a social world of subjugation, hierarchy, and exclusion. The interaction between the physical and the social shaped his views on nature and commons. Gahlor Hill, even if you visit today, had a very compelling and obstructionist presence for the villagers, especially for mushers, as it isolated them from the world. Maji once said, narratives of labor abound around Dasrath Manji. Manji once remarked, I quote, if you have to cut down the mountain, you will have to be 6 feet taller than the mountain. If you have to measure up the depth of the sea, you have to be somewhat deeper than the sea. Real wealth is the desire of the soul, unquote. He went on, and he said, I quote again, the mountain did not appear to me as tall as it made out to be. Nobody is taller than a human being. Dying of cancer, Maji still wanted to devote himself now to working on the river water and save the village from the agony of droughts and floods. Lying on the deathbed, he was saying, I quote, mountains and rivers both have to be changed to keep us alive. Road is not my end. I want to travel through a new path. So, Dasrath Manji, his tireless effort, his labor and life around a common can be understood in an ecological framework with natural, social, and physical meanings. The unsurpassable mountain was a constant reminder of his degraded status as he negotiated with the mountain on an everyday basis to reach his workplace as a Kamiya. It symbolized many personal losses and pains. And yet, working on the mountain, he considered it his very own, his common space, which he could appropriate, carve, and break through his labor. As a Musar, he was an environmental other in his own village, with almost no rights over the common forest and land resources of the mountain, in which caste domination and unequal practices were all paramount. He was deeply uncomfortable with the forms and practices personified in the commons, as they carried within them exclusion, fear, isolation, bondage, pain, thirst, hunger, and caste injustices. Even before the articulation of a formal Indian environmentalism, Dasrath Manji was the harbinger of a distinct ecological sensibility. He desired, loved, worked for a new common. Unbound by the burdens of old, Manji's effort represents an attempt at universalization of space and commons. The new commons is something that is a project of Dalit's future, and hence a product of Dalit's struggle. So now, very briefly coming to my second case study, urban space. We have dealt with the rural space. That is from Chandigarh, Punjab. Have you heard of Nek Chand Saini? 2015, who is widely, anybody here from Chandigarh, Punjab? Or have you visited Rock Garden? Yeah. Okay, some of you visited. So he is widely known for his creation of Rock Garden in Chandigarh city. Born in village Beria Kala, 90 kilometers to the north of Lahore, and now in Pakistan, Nek Chand migrated with his family to the Indian side of the Punjab after partition in 1947. Nek Chand Saini belonged to the Mali caste. हमारे देश में नाम से ज़्यादा सरनेम का महत्व होता है. तो name is less, surname is more. So Nek Chand Saini belonged to Mali caste, which has been characterized in various accounts and in various regions of India as an occupational Sudra caste, traditionally and intimately connected with the occupation of gardening and cultivation, selling of vegetables, fruits, flowers. I was hearing a presentation from Western India, Maharashtra, the great anti-caste radical reformer Jyotiba Phule belonged to the Mali caste. So Nek Chand became a government employee in 1951, a road inspector in the Department of Public Works, PWD, Chandigarh. At a time when the city was conceived as the capital of the post-partition province of Punjab, the Chandigarh Capital Project was launched to showcase the modern development of an independent country under the vision and guidance of our Prime Minister Nehru and the French architect Le Corbusier, along with the European team. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing his name properly. Is it right? The name of the Le Corbusier. So, and many of you must have heard about the Bhakra Nangal Dam, Nehru famous court, temples of modern India. The same time, Chandigarh was conceived, and Nehru also considered Chandigarh as one of the showpiece of. There's a great amount of work on Chandigarh, and also there's a great amount of work that how people protested, the farmer, agriculturists, Dalits, laborers, regarding the construction of Chandigarh and how it was suppressed. So I'm not touching upon those things. So Nek Chand has been portrayed as a great folk artist and architect, extraordinary collector and creator, a sculptor and painter, and has received numerous awards, including the Padma Shri in 1984 by our government, in recognition of his significant contribution to the field of art. So some of you might have seen the rock garden spread over 25 acres of woodlands, a magical miniature creation of multi-layered, communal, imaginative worlds of humans, non-humans, men, women, land, water, forest, mountain, village, city, is used. And the garden was officially inaugurated in 1976, but there is no official year of its construction and completion. So, these are views of rock garden. So as a master crafter, Nek Chand roamed for years in the Shivalik foothills, picking up stones and rocks that resembled birds, animals, humans, and multiple forms. He also relentlessly collected industrial, urban, and household waste on his bicycle within the city and peripheries of the city, which was undergoing huge construction and engineering activities in 1950s and 60s. Within the thick forest, he secretly arranged those stones and rocks, boulders and broken chimeware, discarded tubes and iron rods, broken and cast away glasses, windows and bangles, construction and steelwares, coal and clay, all meant to give expression to his experience and understanding of the anthropogenic world and its natural, human, industrial, and post-industrial life. Open-air sculptures, theater trove, concealed gateways and common spaces, landscapes of mountain range and waterfalls, everything is there, all ended and opened into a new mystic array that made Nekchand's rock garden, an open-ended narrative of human history in India. Thousands of visitors, by one account, 5,000 every day, come to visit this vast creation, making it one of the most popular places in the country. So one can explain Nekchand from many emerging perspectives of Dalit ecologies. One can see the story of Nekchand Saini, underlined, as one of the Dalit Bahujan Anthropocene, and Nekchand in conversation with the place and the garden, narrating his account of planet and people. One can see rock garden from a perspective of a low-caste, everyday relationship with waste. Time is less. Premji has given me the, I will just focus on his relationship, Nekchand relationship with waste. So now all these, you can see the waste kind of a thing. So rock garden is primarily constructed by waste material of the city. Unlimited, unwanted, these discarded material captured the eyes of Nekchand, who started collecting and storing them regularly in a secluded forest area and began casting and placing them in the night hours. So it's virtually impossible to make a list of his waste collection. So I will not get into it. It's impossible. So there are ample accounts of how Nekchand collected the waste material of the city as a road inspector. He was well versed with the new geography and economy of the city. He could thus correctly locate from where to collect what and how to build them completely. He, on his old bicycle, roamed around construction and debris sites and transported waste on its carrier. He went to also displaced villages, construction workers, and industrial localities and asked people for their garbage. When I met with his son last year doing the field work, Anu Saini, who is also an artist and a member of the Rock Garden Society, he said, no storm, thunder, rain, or the even fear of wild animals could deter him any single day in collecting the waste. Later, he also developed centers at industrial, commercial, and colony areas to collect waste and used small trucks by driving himself to transport heavy materials. You know, the generation of human and industrial waste has also been characterized as an arrival of the Anthropocene epoch. In studies of waste, its economic and social relations, its entanglement with race, caste, culture have also been discussed. Issues surrounding the durability of waste, its disposal and management, health, politics, rights, all have gained prominence. Newly emerged discard studies have also opened up the possibilities of seeing vibrancy and liveliness of waste, which can produce new cultural forms. Nekchand related to waste in many innovative ways to erase painful memories of the place, and instead created new human relations with waste. Similarly, he collected, I'm not getting into that story, he collected rocks to narrate a history of Earth and tumbled with them to demonstrate the integral relationship between different biotic and abiotic components of the environment. So in the 1950s, I'm slightly going fast, sorry about that. So in the 1950s, Chandigarh Capitol project, building project, was fast developing in a ways by which agricultural soil, forest land, human habitats were turning into concrete masses of waste. Waste, like the displaced laborers, was a matter out of place, signaling ruining of everyday life and traces left behind by the new age machine and modernity. During the same period, Nekchand often considered himself as part of the wasted lives and refuges of society, became a collector and narrator of waste. Waste was not, Sani are not considered the polluted caste like Chamar. So waste was not his birth-based polluted occupation, but it provided him ground material to build stories of past, present, and future of the earth. The collection of waste was not a stigmatized, hazardous occupation for him. He was a road inspector. It was a creative, challenging endeavor to constitute innumerable faces and facets of human, non-human world. Nekchand's caste was certainly considered lowly, of course not polluted, and backward within the larger social milieu. But he never allowed caste discrimination and subjugation to come in his way. He was dealing with waste and discards not as a polluted and dirty person, but as an illuminated and creative person who was trying to carve a world from below. So now, I'm leaving this thing, he was basically focusing on waste, but at the same time, as I said, he was also collecting the rocks and stones which held memories of lives and times gone by. On his bicycle, he was traveling throughout the Sevalik Hills and the seasonal rivers like Ghaggar, Sukna, and others, and gathered countless, thousands rocks and stones. And he said that, look, I think rocks have a soul. They have a soul. That is his quote. And in his quote, every stone, there is a human being, unquote. Amidst all these things, Nekchand remained a humble and simple human being who had the will to transcend and transform his experiences. He said, I could not meet him during my fieldwork. He passed away, but long time back as a journalist, I met him 15 years ago. Of course, that time my vision was not of this topic. So he said, and this is one of my report that time when I covered him, he observed, I quote, I regarded myself as neither an artist nor a craftsman. I myself was completely insignificant. I had no idea about anything except for the fact that I was devoting my time to a task I was passionate about. I worked to the limits of my strength. It came from my heart and my imagination. My intention was to build a kingdom for gods and goddesses. It is a gift from God. The garden is more than an offering to God. So now, large-scale displacement and discard, destruction and dislocation was, as I said, radically altering the places and people in Chandigarh and surrounding. Villagers, farmers, low-caste people, poor were paying the price for massive changes. Living amidst such wide-scale reorganization, Nekchand tried hard to go beyond it and created his small-scale alternative to explore his vision of place, time, and its substances, which was different from the modernist vision. Simultaneously, collecting rocks with multitude of appearances, he tried to connect deeply with the evolutionary time of planet and people, which provided him with new images and insights to reflect on the present and future. A focus on rock garden, Nekchand's archives of Anthropocene, as I say, unravels his alternative imagination of ecologies. Now, at the end, just 1 minute, Premjish. I can, in conclusion, and sorry for taking, have I taken long? In conclusion, I can give you dozens of examples from industry. It's not only rural and from science, from technology, from factories, from cities, and case studies that can illustrate the point being made in the beginning. Dalit imaginations and experiences of ecology and environmental politics. However, the main idea is, and Ravi was telling me that you also focus on a little bit of framework. So the main framework here is that Dalit ecologies could be a comprehensive collection of regional, literary, language writings by Dalits in order to represent their historical and contemporary environmental experiences and perspectives. In India, environmental academicians like us have traditionally relied on the authority and authenticity of archival and field research. However, Dalits and lower caste people have raised concern about the omissions and exclusions resulting from these kind of research methods, as well as the specific production and or institutionalization of knowledge coming from these kind of sources. Dalit try to create their own archives, or the people who are working on these issues. As I said, they could be autobiographies, literature, life narratives, which could provide greater insight into the natural and material lives and a wide range of experiences. And this certainly can open up new avenues for studying Dalit, caste, and ecology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukul. No, you didn't take a lot of time. It's just that this room and the AC reminds me of a Central Committee meeting in Eastern Europe. The atmosphere is like that. A quick thing that comes to my mind is, since it's also an ecological discussion, and there's a lot of talk about decolonization. And one important trap we all fall into, especially in the contemporary decolonization narratives too, is this constant imagination of a past, an authentic past, a so-called harmonious past, where many ecologists or environmental activists also imagine that land was collectively owned, that every community, every caste had equal access to resources. And this is again constant proposition to return to that past, which is a problematic, which is a cultural myth that has to be unpacked. And the expressions that you have been foregrounding, the examples that you are bringing, the experiences that you have compiled will enable us to dispel these cultural myths. So thank you for that presentation. It also reminded me of an important Dalit environmental activist from Kerala, who you also have written about, Kallan Pokkudan, who is also known as Kandal Pokkudan. Kandal means mangroves, so he's known as the mangrove man of Kerala. And according to Swarnalata and Venugopal, who have written about him, they observe that reading Pokkudan's arboreal activism in the light of reason-critical approaches to vegetality, we argue that his autobiography can be read as an instance of phytography or plant writing, where the very act of writing the self evolves into writing with and listening to vegetal subjects. Kallan Pokkudan, born into a Dalit Pulia caste family of agricultural laborers in Kerala, dedicated his life to restoring mangrove forests. Over the years, he planted thousands of saplings along the banks of Parayangadi River in the Kannur district. In his autobiography, he intertwines human and vegetal histories together to create a unique collection of ecological wisdom and nature conservation. Mangroves are a type of salt-tolerant evergreen forest capable of surviving in otherwise hostile environments thanks to their high adaptability and special root structures that can filter out salt from the water. These extraordinary ecosystems provide humans with many goods and services, such as fisheries, forest products, air pollution reduction, and coastal protection against natural disasters. When Kandal Kadugal Kidel Endajivdam, which is translated as My Life Among the Mangrove Forests, the autobiography of Pokkuran, was released, it marked a significant change in the genre of Dalit life writing in Malayalam. Even Mukul had written about it, stating that this sort of writing is an autobiographical representation of the Dalit eco-narrations of the self. A depiction of an ecological area which involves a politics of survival and struggle. The marginalized Pulaya community of Pukkudan relied heavily on the mangroves ecosystem for their survival. It gave them access to sources of food, fuel, and medicine. When rice couldn't be found, the wetlands provided enough sustenance in the form of fish, berries, and tubers. The migratory birds that came to visit also received an abundance of generosity from the mangroves. So this intricate and deeply rooted caste hierarchies of India and the social relations to land have historically played a significant role in determining access to and control over natural resources, thereby exacerbating environmental injustice. To effectively challenge and rectify these disparities, a multifaceted approach is paramount. And one facet involves the establishment of robust legal frameworks that not only recognize but also safeguard the rights of marginalized communities, including Dalits, to access and manage natural resources. And furthermore, historical land ownership and control have been pivotal in perpetuating caste-based discrimination. In my own PhD research, I have examined how land is demarcated and made sacred through various ritualization processes, and thus made inaccessible for the lower castes. These processes were very complex, involving the identification of land, examination of land through various processes, leading to the selection of land, and finally ritually purifying them. So there are various rituals like tasting the soil, looking at the color of the soil and everything. And if you look at Shilpa Shastras, basically, and there's no rationale provided that for these parameters. Why is that white color soil is ideal for Brahmins? Why is red color soil ideal for Kshatriyas? Why is black color soil ideal for Shudras? There's no rationale for this. But caste became a determinant for the architectural construction, whereas measurement should be the determinant. And we see an inversion of that. And there's no rationale provided for this kind of system that is evolved in medieval Kerala also and in many parts of India also. So Dalit communities, historically, temples and upper caste households ensure the holding of vast tracts of land, thus alienating the lower caste from the ownerships of land. Therefore, the implementation of comprehensive land reforms with a focus on redistributing land to landless Dalit communities emerges as an essential strategy in this. Again, solidarity and alliances within and beyond the Dalit community represent another promising avenue. I'll be brief now because we don't have a lot of time and we have to also engage in a conversation with Mukul. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions also. So what you have shown us today is that also via looking at the rich work of the Dalit community and also the what you call the vast treasure trove of experiences, also the experiences of oppression, is that the Dalit ecologies, the category, exhibits a significant diversity too, presenting a mosaic of ecological perspectives that hold great potential for the Dalit ecologies movement, but also for the larger ecological movement. And the ecological movement could learn a lot from this. And harnessing this diversity, which was also part of the various presentations today, where being the purveyors of the recycle bin of the modernity or the garbage bag of modernity, from that to looking at mushrooms, farming mushrooms, engaging with the topography of waste and rethinking, reconfiguring waste, and all the various wonderful initiatives that was there. All these movements will greatly benefit from this framework, from the Dalit ecological perspective you are presenting today. And I would like to begin with a question, which is looking at when you look at, or when you are again analyzing caste hierarchies or debunking caste hierarchies and their relation with the environment. We all know that these are deeply entrenched in Indian society. And how can scholars and activists and artists effectively address and challenge these hierarchies, which is also a very, strongly entrenched hierarchy in the Indian art also? And how can we challenge these hierarchies to create more inclusive and just environmental policies and practices, especially considering the resistance they might encounter from the dominant groups?
So thanks, Premjish, for your remarks as well as now the question. So look, before responding to your question, look, in this kind of audience, whatever I'm saying in the spirit of discussion, because all of you have a lot of knowledge and understanding about these issues, and many of you are also dealing with these challenges. The second is that I've been working in this area since the past 10 years, or more than 10 years, 12, 13 years. But I can see so many things around which require our attention of people like you. And I can work in this area for whatever remaining life I have. So I know a little bit of this area. I'm not an expert in this area. So regarding this, Premjish, regarding your question that how do we build an inclusive environmentalism, my first response would be that, look, we need to go beyond the, I would say, traditional mode of environmentalism. And when I say traditional mode of environmentalism, I'm not saying entirely in any negative way. Since the time of environmental discourse began in this country, from whatever reference point you take, since the Chipko movement or since the publication of Ram Guha, and so on and so forth, the traditional environmentalism have focused extensively on issues of culture, tradition, community, and past, the colonialism, impact of colonialism, and issues of conservation through Chipko movement and others. So scholarship as well as the movements extensively focused on these many important areas. I would also say that to develop environmental history or writing, it's not wrong to be aware of your past or of your culture. Certainly, it's one of the important areas. But what has happened in that process, that many new emerging arenas of identity, caste, indigeneity, development, international solidarity, these have attended less focus. So the time is to go beyond the framework of traditional environmentalism or traditional environmental scholarship and evolve a framework of, I would say, very simply, new environmentalism, which also should be ready to grapple with the issue of development, science, technology, identity, caste, ownership, all these things together, and so on and so forth. So that could be one response, Premjish, if I'm clear here. Second is that what has happened that rather than speaking against each other, environmental politics vis-a-vis caste politics, or environmental politics vis-a-vis Dalit politics, or Dalit politics vis-a-vis environmental politics, we need to speak to each other rather than speaking against each other, rather than bypassing each other. So what has happened that we have often spoken against each other. And that is true from all the spectrum, with green and blue both. That if you see the trajectory of Dalit politics, they have spoken mostly against or questioned the trajectory of, I would say valid, but of course questioned the validity and trajectory of mainstream environmental politics. But they haven't, in a serious, in-depth manner, engaged with the environmental politics by evolving their own. That's why in the beginning I said that the caste and Dalit studies both also have not taken enough focus on the environmental politics. So speaking with each other. So these two things, I would say, in response to move towards more inclusive environmentalism, going towards the new topics, developing a new environmental framework, and second is speaking with each other, engaging with each other to develop the...
No, for me, the Dalit Ecologies framework, and also, again, the larger Dalit narratives, whether it's related to ecologies, material culture, or the absence of material culture, but the Dalit narratives itself offer a unique opportunity to, first of all, redress the historical injustice. That is very important for me. But also in the decolonial context, why I brought to your attention or to general attention is also because it's very easy for the decolonial movement or the post-colonial movement to put the entire blame on the colonial moment or the colonial modalities of violence and everything that were active in India, but not addressing or not claiming that we were also, and we are still also, we are still able to, or we are still people who can commit authentic violence to our own. And we can still commit authentic injustice to our own, which has not been addressed, and the blames have always been put on colonialism. And here there is a possibility to look at the environmental sustainability and also looking at social justice. And it's also a framework that clubs these things together. So how can we navigate these tensions and also find common ground, which you are also asking for that? Let's also find a common ground to promote both the social justice and environmental sustainability within this framework.
Yeah, look, sorry. Thanks, Premjish, for this thing. Look, the couple of things one can say here, but very briefly, that to build this kind of synergy between social justice and environmental justice or ecological justice, whatever way you say, you also need to question the basic premise is that what is environment and what is ecology and what does this mean? And so that is one thing. The second thing is that even if suppose you leave this kind of a very philosophical and deeper question, see the trajectory of many of the movements that is being launched by racialized community in the world, including India. Many of the so-called social justice movements and initiatives, whether in regarding land, water, forest, sanitation, though they have been expressed in the in the civic language, in the social justice language, in the human rights framework language, but at the heart of it, they really raise the question of uses, ownership, conservation, and politics of resources, politics of environment. After all, we so many times refer about Chipko movement, fine, we must be proud of Chipko movement and its legacy. But after all, what was about the Mahar struggle that happened in 1927? Access to water, access about public water bodies, along with burning of Manu Smriti. So questioning the Hindu orthodoxy in context of water, questioning the various kind of religiosity, rituals associated with water. So the second point, one, that how do you understand ecology environment? That is the basic thing. Second is that how do you see the values, trajectory, history of many social justice movement in our country from the environmental lens? And third is that, look, air pollution can be an environmental movement, wildlife can be an environmental movement, tiger can be an environmental movement. Why can't sanitation be an environmental movement? Tell me. Why can't the community who are connected with sanitation, after all, sanitation is an environmental agenda. So how do you then see these issues from an environmental perspective? Not only the movements, but also the issues. Sanitation, industries like leather, fashion. Why can't it be seen from the struggle about the leather industries, health and occupational studies? I think Ravi comes from Kanpur to some extent. You also belong? No, you don't. I was doing a field study work in Kanpur last year for my book. So we have had glorious movement of industrial worker in Kanpur on the issue of health, safety, very good. But never ever go through all the literature. 99% of leather worker even today, from 19th century to this, from 18th century to this century, are Dalits, ex-untouchable caste. Why the occupational health and safety issue are not being connected with the environmental politics in Kanpur, which happened on the issue of industrial health, safety, environmental activists, and so on. So the third thing is that how do you frame, how do you build the synergy, how do you see the interrelationship in terms of identifying the topic from an environmental angle? Never ever in this country sanitation became an environmental movement, the way air pollution or Chipko or forest or land became. Why so? So it needs to question our framework and alter our framework. Yeah.
I will curb my curiosity and open the floor now. Questions?
I also just last point, my point close to my heart. I really wish to share this thing also came in couple of my discussion with Ravi that we can say many things and we can continue working our own individual research and give seminar in India International Center and do all this good work. But we certainly need to, all of us, create some kind of archives, Dalit environmental archives, which can capture many of these things. Now, since the past 10, 15 years, many of us are working in this area. Many have also worked in past, but we don't have that kind of a Dalit environmental archive which we all can think of. So this is another way to build the synergy, that you don't know the history, you don't know the synergy, you don't have documentation, you have very less literature here, and whatever are there are very scattered. But now, since the past 10, 15 years, there is a wealth of knowledge emerging from grassroots, from Dalit intellectuals, from anti-caste people like me, you, Ravi, and others who are there in this room. So we need to create that kind of a thing. That can also be one good way to create a synergy, understanding, more research, more publication, and build a movement of this kind.
I want to thank you for the talk, because I think it was the second part of your talk was a lesson in art history. Because what is fascinating is that we do study land art, we study, so but our definition never addressed the transformation of a mountain, sculpting a mountain, as probably a new entry to even thinking the question of what is the artistic in life. And the rock garden, when we talk about durational art, we talk about things evolving over a period of time. But here I've always found people don't have the example. So suddenly I was struck, because I've been to rock garden and I've been in conversation with art history, and I was struck because of this idea of the idea of the ecology and redefining the terms of the ecology as an imaginary space as much as a space of practice, and not only an imaginary space in this idea of the new common, it allows us actually a new movement into art, rethinking art history's relationship here. And I thank you for that, because I think it's a very productive moment now, because there are many people searching for different genealogies, and I will bring it to the classroom for sure and see how does it change the way we look at landscapes around us. And thanks for that.
I don't have a question, but somewhere I'm also participating in conversation. So, productive caste, if you think in that way, is always in holding some sort of um, understanding with nature, working with organic, in a way. Then this term here, the ecology, and joining the Dalit ecology, I'm just finding how it works, and uh, thinking about this kind of occupations of cleaning or making products or objects, which always has some sort of involvement with organic material, and it has some sort of practice within it which relates with ecological, this kind of sustainable practice in a way. So, but for me, my understanding of Dalit as a category is something imperceptible somewhere, or this kind of separation with Hindu, no? Or the separation like New Buddhist movement in a way, Ambedkar movement. So this separation itself is what. So, I mean, I think. Yeah, of course we need different knowledge, we need different ideas and communication, but I'm thinking, what are the points where Dalit man is talking about the ecology in a way, and thinking about this kind of global environment. Is it somewhere the world is talking about ecology, so we go with it, or maybe there are some different struggles also, like last conversation I heard with among friends. So today's discussion feels like looking at different culture which haven't consumed by some sort of cultural capital. So Dalit literature or Dalit whatever work has been done seems like haven't touched by the popular culture or the Brahminical culture or this Brahminical capital. So it seems like, so it trying to consume that in a way. So do we want to do that, or कि हमको उन्हें देना है कि हाँ ये हमारा कल्चर है, आप हमारी प्रैक्टिसेस है, इस पे लिखो या हम बात करेंगे. So I find it, I struggle with it in a way. Uh, so this somewhere this global capital involving this rural practices into it? Yeah. I'm a little bit adding a little bit. So I see this Binale settings where a lot of friends talking about Dalit movement. I find it very interesting, good. I also feel inspired. But this entry point itself looks very complicated to me. Uh,
It's a very uh, complex kind of a proposition that you have raised. So my brief response, again, we can engage into further discussion sometime later or during the whatever. Uh, Look, when the environmental justice movement gained ground among the blacks and African Americans, 80s, 90s. So, what did they say? That environment is us not somewhere there in the wild land, in the forest. Environment is, and this is the famous, you must have heard, where we live, where we work, where we play. That is the environment of us. That was the slogan given by Dana Austin, the black activist, if I remember her name correctly. So, and the basic thing is that how do you conceptualize environment? What is environment? Uh, and from that basic premise, then you try to evolve the politics of environment. And for me, the basic premise comes from where we work, where we live, where we play. The other people who have worked in this area, African Americans, blacks, and I take a lot of inspiration from the work which is being done on the issue of blacks, Afro Americans, the racialized community in the other sphere. So other reference point or the beginning point is how do you see the relationship between labor and environment, and how come an environmental perspective be evolved through the prism of labor, work, and related, you said, productive communities or productive castes. So that could be another vantage point. So it's actually, in my understanding, whether if you don't like Dalit ecologies, well, leave Dalit ecologies. If you don't like Dalit environmentalism, leave Dalit environmentalism. But the basic thing is that how do you question the mainstream environmental or dominant environmental discourse and agenda and build, whether through the labor or whether through the where we live, where we work, where we play, or through your own metaphor, own imageries. It could be your own memory. So it could be any beginning point, any reference point. And other thing, and then, sorry. The other thing is that when one works in this area, in the written environment, it's also not linear. We have suppose Dalits and lower castes have invested a lot of political energy in the area of development, modernity, science, Deep Ambedkar's work, other works. So, if one is saying Dalit ecology or Dalit environmentalism, one is not claiming in any linear fashion that everything is there, good and progressive within the realm of Dalit ecologies or Dalit environmentalism. We haven't had the good amount of research to establish that Dalit take on modernity or development is all good, or whether it's justice to Dalit as well as justice to environmental both. So there are many other burning areas where we need to also question critically people who are working in this area about the facet of so-called Dalit environmentalism or Dalit ecologies, which I could not touch upon today, but it also needs to be questioned.
I'll just respond to you very briefly, very simply. I understand what you're saying. And if you look at the category again, forget Dalit ecologies or anything. Dalit is, again, prominently used as, or to foreground an identity, right? The broken person. That's the identity that's usually foregrounded for a particular political project to address the historical injustice, to address the historical oppression. But Dalit, as a conceptual category, as we know, is also a critique of the everyday Brahminical life. And when we deploy that as a critique of the everyday Brahminical life, all these categories which we have learned, ecology, art history, whatever, all these categories, that politics will help us to create a critique of all these categories. And that's all I think we can learn from this. Forget Dalit ecologies or anything. But Dalit as a category is a very useful critique of the everyday dominant Brahminical life. It is a counter-public in itself. Yeah, Ravi.
Yeah. Just to short brief comment on this, I think the word...
Comment, not question.
No. How can I question you? I'm only learning. The productiveness of using Dalit ecology is also critical space because of the dominance of the word, of the idea of ecology. But I think we have to then rethink what is the question, what is environment? What environment comes from the idea of mobilizing the idea of nature, which is Judeo-Christian and comes from the post-Enlightenment era. The idea of nature becomes something which is godly and outside of you. And this was never part of, if you look at the folklore, the word nature in that sense or environment is never mentioned. There's always a presence, but never mentioned. It's a relationship. So if you recategorize, if you take away the word nature as something which defines something outside, then the only way we produce the world is through a relationship to something. And the word nature and environment appears in the scientific framework of the planetary system, of the Gaia system, Otherwise, the word nature, this whole debate of the Anthropocene is marked out by the tipping points of a scientific planetary system. That might exist. I'm not saying that Einstein's laws don't exist and the planetary systems don't exist. But the way we manifest it is not through the planetary system, is through our relationship to something. And that's very much a social and political question. So we often think when we use the word environment, because it has such a large trajectory and history of movement, and the way we look at it is through a planetary lens, that we need standards, we need science to clean up the environment. This whole climate change debate is about science, no? But this whole categorization of the idea of the crisis, I think it should be categorized in structures of power which existed for the last 1,000 years. So even the colonial moment interruption does not rectify that relationship. It only pushes into a certain direction, but doesn't. If you go to pre-modern societies, they're not societies you want to go back to. So the question, the trajectories, fractures are much more complex today because these words exist. Capitalism exists. These words are in great mobility. They have great power. And the idea of, you think, speak with each other. I mean, how do you speak to the labor? How does the environmental movement speak to the labor movement? Forget the Dalit movement. It's been a failure for the environment movement for the last 30 years to speak to the labor movement because they see their objectives as not on the same plane. And this still goes on. I mean, look what's happening in the US on the coal mining thing or on the climate change issues. It's about jobs versus the environment. This is a false category because this category itself creates the fractures. And the problem is how do you overcome a strategy like that? You go back to very initial ideas of what are these categories really consisting of? And you have to go before the colonial movement. Colonial movement, of course, creates a category of glossary of terms which we are sort of take for granted. How do we take this for granted that this is always the case? It's not been always the case. It's very much a production of human society, and the power structures within it. That's what I think, anyway.
Through this Biennale spin, he's basically, I think it's a very dangerously provocative but also tantalizingly interesting, because he is saying that the touchability comes from capitalism's touchability, not comes from some compassion transformation of our inner self. So he's producing a spin on a spin. He's saying capitalism wants to touch you and touch you in its own way, and that touching he is calling the naming. So it's, and with by incorporating the Biennale within it is made us all. Yeah, so it's a tricky epistemic question. Where does, when student days, there is always this play used to be called the imperialism by exclusion and imperialism by inclusion. So we used to all night be awake trying to figure out where are you. So it's basically you are you're just trapping yourself in your own linguistic structure. But it's an interesting question though, Mohit. Yes.
मुझे कुछ बोलना है मुझे एक एक्सपीरियंस खाली शेयर करना है कि जब भी दलित और इस बारे में आता है, मैं जब सॉलिड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट में जॉब किया तो उस टाइम पे कि मैं आता हूँ अपर क्लास से, तो मेरा पापा जो है विष्णु मंदिर का पुजारी है, माँ गांव के मंदिर में पूजा करती है। तो मैं यहाँ पे आके जो जॉब किया तो वो जब घर वालों को पता चला तो घर पे तांडव हुआ पूरा। मैं पहुंचा तो मुझे मतलब बोले कि तू यार दिल्ली गया था तो आर्टिस्ट बनने, ये क्या जाके कूड़ा उठा रहा है। तो जैसे तैसे समझा के मैं इधर मतलब आ गया, ठीक है कोई नहीं। तो यहाँ पर मुझे जो मतलब आर्टिस्ट सर्कल में जो प्रॉब्लम फेस हुआ, तो मैं कहाँ पर था मुझे समझ नहीं आया कि इस तरह से कि कुछ लोग मतलब फ्रेंड सर्कल में थे, लेकिन कुछ लोग मेरे घर आना बंद कर दिए। बोले कि वो बंदा कूड़े में काम करता है, आते थे मिलते थे, कूड़े में काम करता है, उसके घर मत जा, इन्फेक्शन हो जाएगा, ऐसे वैसे। वो भी आर्टिस्ट हैं। आज के डेट में कास्ट जेंडर पॉलिटिक्स के बारे में बात करते हैं, पता नहीं कैसे। तो ये है। हाँ, तो मुझे भी मतलब मुझे बुलाते थे, एक कूड़े वाला आ गया। तो इसको एक क्वेश्चन मुझे अभी तक समझ में नहीं आया, इसको किस तरह से देखा जाए। हाँ, कि मैं घर वालों को तो समझ में आ गया कि मैं अपर कास्ट से आके भी यहाँ पर काम कर रहा हूँ, तो मैं वहाँ पर क्या बना। आज के डेट में जनेऊ भी नहीं पहनता ना, मैं घर पे जाता हूँ, पापा के साथ आज तक भी बात नहीं होता है। वो बोलते हैं तू गया था आर्टिस्ट बनने, जाके कूड़े में काम किया, मेरा जाति भ्रष्ट हो गया। क्यों टिपिकल ब्राह्मण है, मैं उनको रेस्पेक्ट करता हूँ। अच्छा ठीक है, आप अपना भगवान देख लो, मैं अपना काम देख लेता हूँ, कभी बात नहीं होता है। हाँ, तो खाली ये मैंने शेयर किया कि फर्स्ट टाइम मुझे लगा कि शेयर करना चाहिए तो मैं कर दिया। हाँ,
ये सॉरी मैं इसमें अपनी तरफ से जोड़ रहा हूँ। मैं जिस विश्वविद्यालय में प्रोफेसर हूँ, पर्यावरण अध्ययन विभाग है, इन्वायरमेंटल स्टडीज़ डिपार्टमेंट, वहाँ हमारे कई सारे दोस्त कहते हैं कि ये इस डिपार्टमेंट में क्या कर रहा है, ये तो पॉलिटिकल साइंस में होना चाहिए या सोशियोलॉजी में होना चाहिए, इन्वायरमेंटल स्टडीज़ डिपार्टमेंट में क्या काम, जो कास्ट नेचर दलित वगैरह। तो ये जो है केवल आपकी व्यथा नहीं है, कई लोगों की व्यथा हो सकती है।
Thank you, Mukul, for that wonderful lecture. And also, thank you, everyone, for the wonderful insights, amazing insight, provocative insights, comments, suggestions, questions, and everything. And also for a long, exhausting, but amazing, productive day after a long time. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Sukanya, for organizing this. And also, thank you to the Sharma Foundation. And over to you, Ravi.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming and staying so long. Thank you, Sukanya and Shubhankar, for helping out, and it wouldn't have happened without both of you. Thank you.